Level 1. Physics PhD student. You're 24. MIT, 1995. Your dissertation is on neutron transport in fissile materials. That sentence means something very specific to 12 people in your department and almost nothing to everyone else. That ratio will define your professional life. You chose physics at 17 because you wanted to understand the architecture of the world, not its surface, its structure. The way energy behaves, the way matter organizes itself, the mathematical language underneath everything visible. Physics is the grammar of reality. Your advisor is a man named Chen, Taiwanese-American, 60, has been at MIT for 28 years, publishes in journals most physicists read and everyone else doesn't. He supervises your dissertation with the specific patience of someone who has been waiting for a student who asked the right questions. He told you this in your first meeting. Most students ask how. The interesting ones ask why the how works. You ask why. Year 3 of the PhD. A visiting lecturer from Los Alamos National Laboratory. You're told his name is Hargrove. You're told he works in applied physics. You're told the specific application is unspecified. He gives a talk on computational modeling of complex physical systems. The talk is simultaneously the most interesting and the most careful thing you've heard. The kind of careful where you can feel the outline of the things not being said. After he finds you, he says, "Chen tells me you're working on neutron transport." You say, "Yes." He says the problems are different when the geometry is different. You understand exactly what he means. You've understood since you chose this dissertation topic what the applications are. He says, if you're interested in the applied work, there's a conversation to have when you graduate. You finish your PhD in 1998. You call the number on his card. Level 2. Junior scientist, Los Alamos. You're 27. New Mexico, 1998. The Pajarito Plateau. A mesa in the Jemez Mountains, 7,300 feet above sea level, where J. Robert Oppenheimer built Site Y in 1943, and where the work has continued in various forms for 55 years. The clearance process takes 8 months. Background investigation, polygraph, psychological evaluation, the systematic reconstruction of your entire life by people whose job is to find the things you'd rather not have found. You have nothing to hide. The process still feels like surgery. You're cleared to Q level, the Department of Energy's highest clearance, equivalent to top secret/SCI. You're now inside a classification system that divides knowledge in ways that feel at first arbitrary and reveal themselves over time to be structural. You know certain things. The people in adjacent offices know other things. The things you know together constitute something that neither of you knows alone. Your project. Computational modeling of weapon performance. Not the design, the physics of how a device behaves under specific conditions. Simulation, not construction. You build mathematical models that predict what materials do when physics happens to them at scales and speeds that don't occur outside of two contexts: nuclear detonations and the cores of stars. Your office partner is a woman named Vasquez, 41 second-generation Los Alamos. Her father worked here in the 70s. She says, the first year you'll spend wondering if you should be here. The second year you'll spend deciding. After that, you'll just be here. You say, how did you decide? She says, I decided the work matters more with people inside it who ask your kind of questions than without them. You sit with that. Level 3, research scientist. You're 31. Los Alamos, 2002. The post-Cold War world has produced a specific problem for the national laboratories. The Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty means no underground tests. The stockpile is aging. The question, can you certify that aging weapons still work without testing them, is the question that computational physics is being asked to answer. This is called stockpile stewardship. It is the project that absorbs most of your work for the next decade, building simulation capabilities sophisticated enough to replace physical testing. The science is extraordinary. The context is what it is. You publish. Some of what you do is publishable. The computational methods, divorced from the specific geometries and materials that would make them weapons relevant. You present at conferences. You have a career that looks from the outside like physics. From the inside, it's something more specific, a new project. You're asked to contribute to an analysis of a foreign nation's nuclear program, specifically whether a certain device design is achievable, given what's known about their materials and manufacturing capability. You're doing physics. The physics is being done to determine whether a country has or could have nuclear weapons. You do the analysis. The analysis is correct. The analysis is used by people who make policy decisions you're not part of. You think about this. You think about it in the way that people inside large consequential systems learn to think about their role. You are one node, doing your piece, producing something that goes into a larger process whose full shape you can't see. This is true of most work. Here the stakes are particular. You keep doing the physics. Level 4, Senior Scientist. You're 36. Los Alamos, 2007. You lead a small team. 4 scientists, 2 postdocs. Your clearance has expanded. You now have access to design information that you didn't before, which means you understand more of the full picture. Understanding more of the full picture is not neutral. The weapon designs are elegant in a way that is genuinely disturbing to contemplate. The physics is beautiful, and what the physics does is the antithesis of beauty. You've thought about this tension since year 1. You have not resolved it. You have decided that the resolution is not available, and that working inside the tension, eyes open, is different from ignoring it. A colleague, a theorist named Park, Korean-American, brilliant, the person at the lab whose intuitions are most often right, raises something in a staff meeting. A proposed modification to a simulation model that would, he argues, produce more accurate predictions for a specific device type. The modification is technically correct. You see it immediately. You also see that implementing it in the model, then using the model, is a step toward a capability that the current program doesn't have and that the policy framework hasn't authorized. You raise this. In the meeting, you say, "The physics is right, but the step requires authorization above our level." The meeting goes quiet in a specific way. Park says it's just a model. You say models have applications. The application needs to be authorized. The project is reviewed at the program level. The modification is eventually implemented under a different authorization framework that takes 4 months to establish. Park is annoyed with you for 6 weeks. Then he says you were right. You say the physics was right. The process question was right. They're different. He says, are they? If the physics is right, you say, yes. They are. I've thought about it. Level 5, Principal Scientist. You're 41. Los Alamos, 2012. Before we go any further, drop a comment below. What career do you want to see next? Hit like. Subscribe. We post every single day. You're now one of the senior technical people in the program. Your name is on important papers. You're consulted on significant questions. You're in rooms where the decisions are made about what the simulation program does next. The work has an ethics review process. It has had one since the Nunn-Lugar Cooperative Threat Reduction Programs created frameworks for thinking about what national laboratories should and shouldn't do with their expertise. The process is real. It is also institutional. It reviews what's submitted to it and doesn't review what isn't. A request from the Department of Defense, an analysis supporting a modernization program for a specific weapon system. The analysis is within the lab's mission. The weapon system is within the U.S. stockpile. This is the job. You do the analysis. You find something unexpected, a parameter in the existing design that, under a specific set of conditions, produces a performance outcome that wasn't previously characterized. It's not a flaw, it's a behavior. The behavior has implications. You document it, you submit it through proper channels, the channels process it. The relevant people are notified. The program is adjusted. What you do not do. Think about what happens at the end of the chain. What the weapon does when the physics happens. You've made a practice of not thinking about that. Not from avoidance, from a deliberate decision early in your career that your responsibility is the physics and the safety and the accuracy, and that the decision to use is made by people in a different chain with a different accountability. You've examined this decision. You've tested it against the ethics you actually hold. You still believe it. Mostly. The mostly is the honest part. Level 6. Division Leader, you're 46. Los Alamos, 2017. 40 scientists. A budget of $180 million annually. Programs that span the full range of the lab's weapons mission. The management work is different from the science work. The science work is specific. You have a problem, you have tools, you apply the tools, you get an answer, you check the answer. The management work is systemic. You're creating the conditions for science to happen, maintaining the culture that allows it, making decisions about people and resources that shape what's possible. You're good at it. You're also aware that every year of management is a year of doing less science, and that you are in some ways becoming something different from what you set out to be. A recruitment situation. A Chinese-American scientist, exceptional, the best computational physicist you've seen in years, could contribute significantly to the program. Has a complicated background flag in the clearance process. Not disqualifying, but complicated. The process will take longer. The lab has had issues with this. Assumptions made about scientists of Chinese heritage that were not based on evidence, and that cost the lab talent and caused significant harm to people who were cleared. You know this history. Chen, your dissertation advisor, has his own history with the national labs in the 90s that he doesn't talk about. You advocate for the process to proceed fairly and thoroughly. You monitor it. The scientist is cleared. 14 months, longer than it should have taken. He joins the division. He's as good as you thought. Maybe better. You write a memo about the clearance timeline. It goes to the security office. It is received and filed. The process improves marginally. You will write similar memos for the remainder of your career. Level 7. Program Director, you're 50. Washington, D.C./Los Alamos, 2021. You're in Washington now, not in the lab, in the interface between the lab and the government. Your title is Program Director for Advanced Science, which means you're in the room where the National Nuclear Security Administration discusses what the labs should do and you represent what the labs can do. The policy layer, the interface between physics and politics. The translation work, making the technical legible to people who make resource and policy decisions, making the policy constraints legible to people who do science. You're good at translation. You've been doing it in your head for 20 years. A significant policy question, whether to pursue a new warhead design or to continue life extension programs for existing designs. The scientific arguments, the cost arguments, the arms control arguments, the deterrence arguments. You're asked to provide the technical input to the policy process. You provide it accurately. You include your uncertainties, the things the science can't settle. You explicitly note where the technical input ends and the policy judgment begins. The policy process uses your input. It also uses things you didn't provide. Political considerations, alliance considerations, congressional considerations. The decision is not what you would have decided if the decision were yours. The decision isn't yours. You've known that since the beginning. Vasquez retired last year. She sent you an email on her last day. The work mattered. I still believe that. I hope you do too. You replied, I do. With the asterisks I've always had. She replied, the asterisks are the honest part. Level 8, Associate Director of Science. You're 54. Los Alamos, 2025. You came back to the lab. Washington was the interface. The lab is the thing. Associate Director for Science is the senior scientific position. You are responsible for the scientific quality and integrity of everything the lab produces. Not the programs, the science inside the programs. The difference is real, a question of scientific integrity, a result in a program under one of your divisions, a simulation result that a team is interpreting as confirming a design decision. The result is being interpreted correctly by the physics. The interpretation is being used, you believe, to close off an alternative approach that the team prefers not to pursue. This is subtle. The physics is right. The interpretation is right. The use of the interpretation has a thumb on the scale. You call the division leader. You say, I want to see the full parameter space analysis. not the result, the space around the result. The analysis shows exactly what you thought. The result is real and the result sits in a valley surrounded by terrain the team didn't map. You require the terrain to be mapped. It changes the conclusion from settled to more complicated. The program is delayed 6 months. The division leader is not happy. The eventual design decision is better. Park, long retired, living in Albuquerque, sends you a message when he reads about the delay in a trade publication. Is this yours? You write back, just the process. He writes, yes, just the process. That's everything. Level 9. Director, National Laboratory. You're 59. You run Los Alamos, 12,000 employees, an annual budget of $3.8 billion. The responsibility for every scientific and safety and security aspect of a national laboratory whose mission is, in simplified form, to ensure that the United States nuclear deterrent is safe, secure, and effective. You are the custodian of the most destructive knowledge human beings have produced. You think about Oppenheimer sometimes. Not the myth, the actual record. A man who built the thing and then spent the rest of his life living with what he'd built, who was eventually stripped of his clearance by people whose judgment was inferior to his in every relevant dimension. You don't think the parallel is close? The Cold War is over. The deterrence logic is different. The scale of production is different. You think about it anyway. Specifically, what Oppenheimer got right and what he got wrong, and whether you're making the same mistakes in different forms. A public statement. A group of scientists, some inside the lab system, some outside, have issued a letter arguing that a specific modernization program exceeds the bounds of the stockpile stewardship mission and constitutes de facto development of new capabilities. The letter is technically informed and the argument has merit. You write a response. You address the technical arguments. You're honest about where the argument has merit and where it doesn't. You don't dismiss it. Your communications office wants to soften the acknowledgement of merit. You don't soften it. The response is published. The scientists respond to the response. The conversation continues in the places where these conversations happen. You believe the conversation matters. You believe your job is to be inside it, honestly. Level 10, retired. You're 63. New Mexico, 2034. You stepped down at 62. The laboratory continues. You teach. One course at UNM on the science and policy of nuclear weapons. Not a weapons course. A course about what the knowledge is and what it means and what it has produced and what it might produce. The students are 22. They were born after the Cold War ended. The weapons are abstract to them in a way they are not abstract to you. You put the Trinity test photograph on the projector. July 16, 1945, 5:29 a.m. The fireball over the Jornada del Muerto desert. Oppenheimer watching it and recalling the Bhagavad Gita. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. You say this is the moment the knowledge became irreversible. The physics was already known. The Germans were working on it. The Japanese were working on it. But the device made it physical, irreversibly physical. A student asks, do you think it should have been built? You say that's not a question that can be answered at this remove. The question is what we do with it now. She says, what do we do with it now? You say, we maintain it carefully, reduce it where reduction is possible, build the institutions that make its use less likely, and do the basic science that might eventually offer alternatives. She says, is that enough? You look at her, you say, no, but it's what's possible inside the physics of the situation. She says, what's the physics of the situation? You say, once you know how to make a thing, you can't unknow it. That's not a law of physics. It's a law of knowledge. The challenge is everything that comes after the knowing. She writes it down. You look at the photograph. The fireball over the desert. The 5:29 a.m. light. You spent 39 years inside the knowledge. You did the physics carefully. You asked the process questions. You pushed back when pushing back mattered. The weapons still exist. The deterrent still holds mostly. The alternatives are further away than they should be. Mostly is the honest part. It always was. You close the lecture, the students leave. You sit in the empty classroom and look at the photograph for a moment.